Now, speaking of these other leagues starting, Chris, there's something I want to go through with you, and that's related to the NHL, actually. So our North American audience and those people across the pond here in Europe that follow the NHL, we're going to be seeing a lot of new faces across the pond as these European leagues start up. In fact, we're going to be seeing a lot of new faces. So if I just bring up this Elite Prospects list, this is the list of all of the players within the last few weeks or so that the NHL have loaned to teams in Europe. Their respective franchises, whether it be the Edmonton Oilers, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the New York Rangers, anything like that, all of these teams are loaning out their prospects, not just European prospects. We are seeing instances of North American prospects also being sent over to respective teams in the league. The latest being Gaetan Haas of the Edmonton Oilers. He's a Swiss-born player. He's going to go play for SC Bern, the arena that gets the most fans in pretty much every single season for the last however many. Evan Bouchard, a really highly touted prospect from Canada for the Edmonton Oilers. He's going to the Allsvenskan in Sweden. Alexander Texier, the French-born player for the Blue Jackets, going to Kalpa in Finland. Emil Benstrom going to HIFK. Jakub Zaboril for the Bruins going to Kometa Brno, as is the New York Rangers' Libor Hayek. So we're seeing a lot of prospects that look like they could become pretty solid players in the NHL one day, whether it be next season or the season after that, or kind of a more long-term project. We're seeing a lot of these guys moving overseas and kind of going, right, I want to get some ice time before the NHL season gets underway. I want to kind of refine my game a little bit. Chris, what are your thoughts on all of these players moving over to North America? Obviously, on the surface, it looks like a really good thing for them personally. Gives them the chance to get more ice time, maybe have a bigger role on a team in Europe as opposed to playing in North America in kind of like a bottom six role. It kind of has the feeling of a lockout year for everybody except the NHL players, where you know the NHL's locked out, so all the NHL players go and move overseas or play in the AHL until the lockout ends. But it's kind of a specific lockout for everybody that isn't a regular on an NHL team. It's a very unique scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what makes it even more unique is the fact that obviously the NHL for 4 teams is still playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the delay in the playoffs. So they know, well, they know when the league is going to restart. Everything could change, I suppose, but it does make sense for a lot of these players, as we're looking at, to go back to a European side. There's a lot of them as well that I'm looking at. A lot of these are European.
Yeah.
Swiss, French, Swedish, Czech, and a lot of them have gone to sides in their country. When you look at it a bit more closely, so perhaps there is an element of they went home for the summer and now, rather than going back, are staying local.
Yeah, true.
Because there's a lot of Swedes that have gone to play in Sweden and so on. The German on there, Leon Gowank, has gone to the Berlin side. So there is perhaps a lot of that element in there as well. But of course, the hockey players, they want to go and play hockey. That's the big thing about it. And if they can't go over and play in North America, which they can't at the moment because the games aren't on, then let's go to the not the Polish league, but the KHL, the DEL is an interesting one because that's not meant to start until November the 13th. But let's go and play for these teams, get a few games under our belt before the NHL season restarts.
Do you think that there might be some concerns about when the American Hockey League season is going to start then, given the fact that there's a lot of guys on this list that we've currently got up here right now that would be playing in the AHL if the AHL season was supposed to start before the NHL season? Because obviously we've heard a lot about the NHL season. It might be December, it might be January, it might be February. They haven't quite figured out a date. And given what's been happening in the US, I think they've got to err on the side of caution and make sure that they make the right decision on when they're going to be playing. But given a lot of these players are going to Bern, they're going to the NLA, they're going to the SHL, they're going to the Finnish Liga, they're going to the Czech League, they're going to the DEL and things like that. There's a lot of examples of these players like Libor Hayek, if he's not on the Rangers roster next season, he'd be playing in the AHL. Texier should be playing on an NHL roster, but considering he's kind of slightly lower down the depth chart than some of the other players, he's going to the Finnish Liga. Evan Bouchard will be fighting for a roster spot in the Edmonton Oilers organization next season. He's going to the Swedish Allsvenskan. So do you think there might be concerns that the AHL season might not be starting when it says it is? Do you think there might be some news that comes out soon? Obviously, we don't know this, and this is complete hearsay. I just want to preface that point because obviously we're not insiders to the AHL. We're the European hockey guys. We don't really cover North American hockey as much as some of the other shows on the network, which you should definitely go and check out. But do you think there's a situation where the AHL might be thinking, okay, we might need to push back our season as well? So a lot of them are going, oh, well, we're in our native countries anyway because we had to go home because of the situation, especially some of these players that might be with teams that didn't make it to the playoffs, for example. Do you think they're thinking, you know what, we've spoken to the management, they've said it'd be a really good idea if we refined a certain element of our game back home, we get a bigger role on the team that we're playing for, we get more ice time, more responsibility, and we can kind of refine our game a little bit more and then wait until training camps begin. Do you think there might be some element to that, Chris?
I think there is, yeah. I mean, even the AHL, obviously over stateside, is really quite big.
Yeah.
I mean, the AHL is arguably larger than a lot of the leagues over here.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
So it's the team surrounding it is so much larger. I mean, you've not got to just consider the players, but all of the staff, kit, all the rest of it. So the operation is always a much larger, and what they've got to get their head around, which perhaps teams over here won't have to as much, is this: how are we going to be able to safely move from one place to the next, and then over there, and then the next day we're on the complete other coast of the country, that sort of thing. And they've got a massive kind of logistical headache surrounding all that, because of course they don't know what's going to happen either. Depends on what they're told. I know at one point weren't they all supposed to drink disinfectant or something, they were told.
Definitely don't do that. Don't do that. Us here at the Europuck podcast recommend you don't do that.
Yes, don't drink Dettol or whatever it was that they were told.
Please don't.
No, don't. Yeah, but no one really knows what's going to happen. So I think it's definitely a smart move to come over to Europe, where the countries are a lot smaller, the traveling is a lot less, so it's probably easier to kind of get games on and happening. So I do think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it kind of, given some of these guys might be more long-term projects as well. Obviously, there's a lot of guys here that will be competing for roster spots when training camps begin, but there is also a lot of guys here that are kind of a few years away potentially from being NHL ready or competing or legitimately competing for a roster spot in the NHL. What better way to kind of help them fast track their way to the NHL as quickly as possible or as correctly as possible by going, okay, well, the NHL season or the AHL season isn't starting right till the end of the year. We're in September now. You can go get 3 months, maybe even 3, 4, 5 months playing in your domestic league, having a bigger role with an organization. You're a lot more comfortable back home because obviously I've talked about this a lot on some of the other podcasts I went on earlier this week with the Hockey Podcast Network. I talked to the Detroit Red Wings, I talked to the New Jersey Devils and everything like that. The one thing I always mention is a lot of these guys, English might not be a language that they know very well. So there's a big culture change for some of these guys. For example, if you're coming from the Czech Republic, your English might not be very good. I know Sweden is kind of a little bit more like, or some places in Sweden are more used to English. It obviously depends on where in which countries you're coming from. You might come from rural Finland, where English is not a single word of English is spoken, and then you go and play in the Finnish Liga, where you don't need to know English because you're in Finland and Finnish is the primary language. So you move over to North America, it's a complete culture clash for you. You're kind of trying to get a sense of what the culture is like, and also trying to be a good hockey player. So it gives these guys a chance to maybe go back home for a little while, see their friends and family, be much closer to home, understand the culture where they're playing, and get the opportunity to kind of find a bigger role on a team that 2-3 years ago, back when they were 17, 18, they couldn't have done because they weren't quite old enough or mature enough, or their game wasn't rounded out enough. So I think in the grand scheme of things, fans of the NHL should not panic about this. This is good. It means that your prospects are getting ice time, and probably pretty good ice time with other teams across the pond. And it means they're getting the chance. Obviously, quite a lot of these leagues haven't started up yet, but within the next month or so, the SHL, the NLA, the Finnish Liga, they will have all started up within the next month to 6 weeks. So keep an eye out for them. They could be playing some pretty good hockey overseas. Now, speaking of kind of...
the other thing as
well...
well...
No, go for it, Chris.
I was going to say, the other thing as well is that there aren't many that have gone over to kind of like the KHL, but they're getting ice time for these teams. They're still going to be coming up against top quality players, and a lot of players still in these leagues have had NHL experience.
Yep.
So it's going to help grow the prospects as well, because yes, okay, they might not be quite good enough anymore, but they're still top quality players that they're going to be coming up against. And particularly, it's something we have over here in Nottingham in our philosophy with the Lions, who I do commentary on, is yes, we lose every single game, but we're playing 16, 17-year-olds against players with 10, 15 years experience, and some of them have top level experience here in the UK. And it's about, you get better by playing the players that are better than you, and you step up, and you gradually get up and reach that level. So yeah, okay, you play them, let's say 3 times a season. Yes, you might lose every game, but if you lose the first game 8-0 and you lose the second game 6-0 and the third game, say 4-1, you can see an improvement. And I think that's what a lot of the NHL teams are going to be looking for in the prospects is this kind of improvement over the years.
Yeah, and it's like I've said on a lot of the podcasts on the network recently, just because you don't play very long in the NHL doesn't mean you can't have a career as a successful hockey player. You can go and play 10, 15 years in Europe, and you might even make more money than you would have signing 1 year, $1 million contracts every year to play in the NHL. Like, the KHL plays pretty well, especially for former NHLers. That's why a lot of players move over, because if they're looking at, oh, okay, I might get the chance to play on a 1 year, $1 million contract in the NHL and kind of be a depth guy, or I could go sign a 3-year contract in the KHL and get paid 3 times as more, then I'm going to go over there because I'm going to be relied on more as a bigger member of the team and everything like that. So that's why you see a lot of kind of ex-NHLers that might not necessarily be at that level anymore, through no fault of their own perhaps, but they're still not at that level, going overseas and kind of carving out a good second half of their career elsewhere in some really good hockey leagues. Like, sure, the NHL is the best league in the world, but there's a lot of good hockey available in Europe, which I feel like there's a stigma around that in North America. And I talked about this quite a lot, being like, oh, just because a guy goes to the KHL or the Swedish league or the Finnish league, they're kind of seen as a bust. They're really not. It just means they're not quite at the NHL level. They're not one of the top 200 players in the world. That doesn't mean they're not one of the top 500 players in the world, which is a pretty impressive achievement to boast. So regardless of whether you make it to the NHL or not. But that's a good point, Chris.